Good morning and welcome to today's daily reflection. How often have we seen other people who have a great faith pray for the miraculous to happen? And it happens. For most of us, however, we can sometimes find it difficult to have that kind of faith. What faith we might have can sometimes seem fragile, prone to getting bruised by doubt and unbelief. Today's set reading recalls the stories of those that we call Old Testament heroes of faith. It is from Hebrews chapter 11, verses 17 to 31. It's a long reading, so I'm only going to read from verses 17 to 25 and 30 to 31. It was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when God was testing him. Abraham, who had received God's promises, was ready to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Even though God had told him, Isaac is a son through whom your descendants will be counted. Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life again. And in a sense, Abraham did receive his son back from the dead. It was by faith that Isaac promised blessings for the future to his sons, Jacob and Esau. It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and bowed in worship as he leaned on his staff. It was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt. He even commanded them to take his bones with them when they left. It was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months when he was born. They saw that God had given them an unusual child, and they were not afraid to disobey the king's command. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. And it was by faith that the people of Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days as the walls came crashing down. It was by faith that Rahab the prostitute was not destroyed with her people in the city, for she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Even considering that those are considered pillars of faith, they all had doubts, and in some cases they did not live up to the label. Abraham, for example, had many failures and doubts. While he was in Egypt to escape a famine in Canaan, he was willing to give his wife in exchange for his own life and livelihood. Isaac, his son, seemed to have followed Abraham's example when he too passed his wife Rebekah off as his sister, not his wife, in order to save his own life. And although considered a man of great faith, Joseph wasn't always so squeaky clean. Knowing he was his father Jacob's favourite son, he continued to brag to his brothers, and later, while as a high official in Egypt, he didn't treat his brothers very well when they begged his forgiveness. As for Moses, a man of exemplary faith, but he too continued to doubt. He was always full of objections as to why he couldn't do as God asked. Ultimately, God told him that because he had failed to trust him enough, he wouldn't be the one to finally lead Israel into the promised land. So when we look at our own faith, it's easy to decide our faith is very fragile. But a fragile faith is a faith that will break in response to life's difficulties. With a fragile faith, trust in God becomes conditional. It becomes rooted in questions like, what has God done for me? In Mark's Gospel, there's a story about a father with a fragile faith. The man's son had been possessed by a demon. He had asked the disciples to cast the demons out, but they couldn't. He said to Jesus, "Teacher, I brought you my son, possessed with a spirit. I told your disciples to cast it out, but they couldn't do it." Jesus answered them, "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you?" Immediately the boy's father cried out and said, "I do believe. Help my unbelief." The father had a faith that was fragile and failing, and was about to fall like a house of cards. But Jesus did respond to the father's fragile faith and cast out his son's demon. As the disciples later asked Jesus, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" His answer was, "Because of the littleness of your faith." For truly I say to you, if you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to that mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. To have faith means to accept that life can be difficult. After all, the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. And to understand that life will present us with challenges and difficulties, but it also allows us to be prepared to face them and not feel like a victim when they arise. It isn't the amount of faith that we have that is important. What is important is the object of our faith. That's what matters. The father's faith in that story was nothing to write home about, maybe a bit like our own at times. He would never be termed as a hero of faith. He was only a helpless, desperate man who turned to Jesus for help with his own fragile faith, but it was enough. Rahab's also mentioned. Who was Rahab in the Bible? She is almost always mentioned in the Bible as Rahab the harlot, Rahab the prostitute. At first glance, you might think she didn't have a chance of being classed as a hero of faith. After all, she was a Canaanite, she was a woman, and she was a prostitute, although later generations, squeamish about her occupation, preferred to think of her as an innkeeper. But through her faith in God, however, she is remembered in Jewish tradition as an ancestress of kings and prophets, and in the New Testament as an ancestor of Jesus. So to finish with a prayer. Lord, guide of the wanderers, as we journey through uncharted terrains of life, let our steps be firmly planted in faith. Illuminate our path with the light of your truth, that we may see beyond the illusions of fear and doubt. Empower us to walk forward with confidence, not by sight, but by the certainty of your unfailing presence. In every breath, in every heartbeat, instill in us the courage to walk by faith, to live boldly in the assurance of your love and grace. Amen. Well, whatever you do today, this week, stay safe and keep smiling. Bye for now.